Hi, this is Jason Nickleby, Coordinator of Officials with the Minnesota State High School League, and this is basketball officiating training tape number 5. We'll be taking a look at a number of plays that involve mechanics, positioning, rules knowledge, and how we apply those to address situations that occur in our games. Again, not picking on any one coach, player, team, or official, just trying to learn from these plays as we go through the season. So with that, we'll take a look at some plays. On this play, we have a three-point shot from the top of the key. Take a look at our mechanics. C moves lower to view space. We close down the shot, and then in good position to view contact at the end of the play. So positioning, mechanics-wise, well done by the crew on this sequence. The only thing I would say is lead, you close down really well, mirroring the ball. Just stay put when the shot goes up. You're in good position to view rebounding action and then the subsequent contact at the end of the play. Try not to bail out of there. You were in good position initially. At the end of the play, we have a foul. And let's take a look at Rule 10.7, penalty summary, page 68. And it says that we will have no free throws for fouls when there is a team control foul. And that is letter B there, Rule 10 penalty summary. And in this case, we don't have team control anymore because we have a shot attempt. And so that's covered on page 31, Rule 4.12.3a, and that says that team control continues until the ball is in flight during a try or tap for field goals. So in this case, we have attempt for goal, which means team control is now gone, which means when we have a foul on the offense, it is not a team control any longer. And therefore, if we were in the bonus, we would be shooting free throws on the other end. This is early in the game, so no free throws. But be aware of team control and when it exists, and if we should have free throws or not. But overall, good positioning and mechanics, and then just some rules pieces to be aware of. On this play, we have a front court throw-in, table side. You'll notice that the the throw-in is deflected off the side of the backboard. Initially, the defense gains control of the basketball, and then the lead calls the ball out of bounds off the backboard. The trail comes in, provides information, and then they change the call and give it back to the defense who had just gained control. So this is really well done mechanically, real well handled as far as providing help and then making decision and moving ahead. So really well done from the crew from that standpoint. Let's talk the rule aspects of this play. We've had a couple of questions about when the ball is out of bounds, when it isn't, as it relates to the backboard and hitting supports and those kinds of things. So the first piece is Rule 712A.3, and that says that the ball is out of bounds when it hits the supports or back of the backboard. So in this case, it's not one of the pipes, it's not a shot clock, it's not anything that's attached to the backboard. It hits the padding on the side of the backboard and not the back of the backboard, which would be listed under this rule on page 51. So then once we figured out that that rule doesn't apply, that the ball is not in fact out of bounds, the question then becomes, what do we do with the basketball? So if you take a look at 436.1, this is point of interruption. It talks about what to do when you have situations such as this. And point of interruption is the method of resuming play due an official's inadvertent whistle. So that's what we have here. Inadvertently called out of bounds, and then we make a correction. So then you go to Article 2, and it says that play must be resumed by one of the following methods, and that would be a throw into the team that was in control at an out-of-bounds spot nearest to where the ball was located when the interruption occurred, which is what we have here. So when White gained control of the basketball, that's when the inadvertent whistle occurred, and that's the point of interruption, and we'll have a throw-in for them. If for some reason a team doesn't have control, then we would go to the alternating possession arrow to decide who would get the ball for a throw-in. In this case, the defense clearly has control, and we would give it to them. So that's how we would resume play from there. And if you take a look at Rule 753, it also talks about a designated out of bounds spot thrown nearest to where the ball became dead. And any player of the team in control must make the throw in, as we have in this case. So, a good job by the crew working together to ultimately get it correct and get the rule and the mechanics part of that adjudicated quickly and efficiently, and we ultimately get it right. But make sure we take a look at the rules as it relates to out of bounds, and then how it relates to team control, point of interruption, and alternating possession arrow. On this play, we have a missed shot, and we have a held ball off the rebound. Good mechanics here. We close with two officials. The third official stays outside, views players, make sure that we don't have anything going on outside of that scrum for the basketball. So this is well done mechanically. Good coverage. New trail, maybe work your way over a little bit so you can officiate players prior to the held ball, but overall, good coverage. And then we have a throw-in and then a subsequent foul. So a couple things here. First thing, 643A says that an alternating possession throw-in must be from the out-of-bounds spot nearest to where the ball was located. An alternating possession throw-in must result when a held ball occurs. Then you will see that we have a foul during the throw-in. Notice the time, minute 27, so pretty critical to know who has the arrow and these types of rules and how we would handle these types of situations. The next piece is take a look at Rule 442.5, and that says that the throw-in ends when, and it talks about the reasons that a throw-in would end, and we're still holding on to the ball as the thrower when this foul occurs. So then the next rule that we are taken to handle this situation is Rule 645, and that says that the opportunity to make an alternating possession throw-in is lost if the throw-in team violates. If either team fouls during an alternating possession throw-in, it does not cause the throw-in team to lose the possession arrow. So in this case, we have a foul. If we have a foul by either team, we're not flipping the arrow. Obviously, that is a pretty big deal with a minute 27 to go in a 4-point game. So if we have this type of situation, we would want to communicate that very effectively with the table, with the coaches. In fact, it's more likely than not that the table will not be able to help you with this. This is something that the crew is going to have to pick up on their own and understand these rules. So we have a held ball throw-in, or we have a throw-in off of the held ball. We have a foul prior to the throw-in coming to an end, which means that by rule, the arrow will not change. And that's a pretty big deal in a close game. So again, make sure we communicate that very well with the teams, which occurred here. But remember, we're probably going to be on our own during a regular season game to handle this communication. On this play, we're going to have a throw-in in the backcourt with some pressure. So C, we want to hang back and help. If we have 4 or more players, we want to help. You see that they drop, so we can slowly shuffle down court, and you'll see we have a collision at midcourt and then a subsequent foul at the basket. So let's talk about this play from a mechanics and coverage perspective. Again, C, we need to stay back and help if we have 4 or more players, which we have here. Once they start to clear, we can start to shuffle down court, but we're still going to need to be able to help with this trouble area, which is right in the middle of the court there. So C, we would want to be right about mid-court or so we can take that look across the paint and help with that collision. This is covered on page 166 of the Mechanics Illustrated, and it says on that page that the C can come get this play because many times the trail will be trailing it and will not have the proper perspective to make an accurate ruling on this. So C, you want to hang back, hang tight, and assist, and then trail. If you can get up the sideline and trail the ball by a little bit, just a little bit more, get up court a little bit more, we might be in position to assist on this play. But for the most part, this call is probably going to have to come from C, and it appears that the offensive player plays through the chest of the defensive player, so we should have an offensive foul. But just talk about this play mechanically, how you would cover it, because this has a potential for double whistles and blarges as well if we don't communicate how we're going to cover this play. So C, hang back and help, and you're probably going to be the one that needs to get this play, and then trail if you can get up the sideline and be about a yard or two behind the ball. You might be in a little better position to assist on this play. Tough play. Just talk about it mechanics and coverage wise. Okay, we have a play in the front court here. Initial position is good. Trail, you don't have to come out quite as high. You're good right at the 28-foot mark, and you're in good position. So when the ball comes back out, just stay right where you are, and you'll be in good position to officiate that initial matchup at the top of the key. And then you see we have a traveling violation that's called by the center official, and then subsequent throw-in at the proper location on the sideline. So take a look at the spots for throw-in should occur in the Mechanics Illustrated as well as the rule book, and you'll see it there. As it relates to the traveling violation, again, traveling is something that we struggle with at all levels, and we just have to pick up the pivot foot and know what they can do with it. When you put this in slow motion, this looks really ugly. Again, ugly is not necessarily illegal. It is in this case. This is a traveling violation, and make sure that we get into Rule 444 and specifically 444-3A on this play. The pivot foot may be lifted but not returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for goal. In this case, she passes, but she picks up the pivot foot and puts it back down. So if she just picks up the pivot foot, she can pass, but in this case, she picks it up, puts it back down prior to passing the ball. Therefore, a traveling violation is called and is properly done on this play. So good coverage, proper rules knowledge, and then good job of putting the throw-in the correct location. On this play, we have a blood situation, and it's handled very, very well by the crew, both rules-wise and mechanics. So first thing, let's take a look at the rule. The rule that covers this is Rule 337, and in particular, take a look at the notes 1 and 2 as well. And this says that a player who is bleeding, has an open wound, or has any amount of blood on his or her uniform, or has blood on her person, his or her person must be directed to leave the game until the bleeding is stopped, the wound is covered, and the uniform and or body is appropriately cleaned. The uniform may be changed before returning to competition, and a timeout must be requested by and granted to his or her team, and the situation can be corrected by the end of the timeout. So they can come back or be subbed for. So in this case, they choose to sub for number 12, so they can remedy the blood situation and sub him back once we have the clock properly started. So that is one option. The other option, as stated in the rule, is that the team can call timeout to buy their player back in. If they remedy the blood situation prior to the end of the timeout, the number 12 could come back into the game at the conclusion of the timeout. If players from both teams need to leave for blood, both teams must request and be granted a timeout in order to keep each player in the game. So, in other words, you have to swipe your own credit card to buy your player back into the game. You can't use the other team's credit card to buy your player back into the game. So just look at it that way, or remember it that way, that in order to buy your player back in the game, you got to use your own credit card. And there is no provision where you get 20 seconds or 30 seconds or some other kind of time frame to fix a blood situation. If they have blood, they have to leave the game. In other levels, they get 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that. We don't have that in the high school game. If they have blood, they got to go. And if they want to buy them back into the game, they need to use a timeout for their team to get them back in the game. So this is well handled mechanically and rules wise. Just remember there's no time frame to fix it unless they call a timeout, in which case they can buy their player back in the game. In this play, the ball handler is dribbling from the backcourt to the front court. As soon as she gets into the front court, we have a closely guarded count going, and a subsequent closely guarded violation is called. So let's take a look at the rule and how those pieces fit together with this play. First being Rule 410, the definition of closely guarded, which says that a closely guarded situation occurs when a player in control of the ball in his or her team's front court is continuously guarded by any opponent who is within 6 feet of the player who is holding or dribbling the ball. So we have both of those aspects. The distance must be measured from the forward foot or feet of the defender to the forward foot or feet of the ball handler. A closely guarded count must be terminated when the offensive player in control of the ball gets his or her head past and shoulders past the defensive player, which does not occur when this violation is called. At the time of the violation, her head and shoulders are not past the defensive player. So then the next piece is Rule 910, closely guarded definition of the violation. A player must not, while closely guarded in his or her front court, hold the ball for 5 seconds or dribble the ball for 5 seconds. So that's what we have here. The penalty for that, the ball is dead when the violation occurs, and it's awarded to the opponents for a throw-in from the designated out of bounds spot nearest the violation. So this is properly called from a rule standpoint. Mechanically, just remember in the front court, in high school basketball, we're pretty much going to have a closely guarded count going what seems like all the time. We're going to feel like our arms are going to fall off because we're alternating arms on each count. But in high school basketball, that's the way the rules are written. And remember, 6 feet is a long ways. A lot of the time, we make defensive players come up way too far before we give them the count. If they're within 6 feet, we got to start counting. That's the high school rule, and we don't really have much of a choice on that. Remember, we're alternating hands when we begin a count and start a new one. But in this case, as soon as she's in the front court and that defensive player is within 6 feet, we need to begin a closely guarded count. And remember, they have to get past the with shoulders and head past the defensive player before we can stop that count, which we don't do here. So this is properly handled from a mechanics and coverage standpoint, and this is well done, giving the defensive player their due by starting the count. On this last play, let's discuss end of half, end of game, last second shot mechanics. Specifically addressed on page 129 of the Mechanics Illustrated, and it gives you some options, but this is something that we ultimately need to pregame as a crew so that we're on the same page. The Mechanics Illustrated allows the opportunity for the C to be locked in, typically 15-20 seconds, somewhere in that neighborhood, which means if we do that, the lead can go back and forth as they need for proper coverage. The C would be locked into their position, and they would be locked into the position of C and not necessarily at the free throw line extended. So they might be in a typical trail type position if need be, depending on what the coverage requires. But if we went back in transition, so we have a turnover like we have here, we have a shot and we're going to turn and go back the other direction. If we lock in the C, at least we know that that person is going to have the last second shot no matter what direction we're going. It's always going to be trail or center that's opposite the table will have last second shot or will be primary for last second shot. The other crewmates can assist, but the ultimate call is going to rest with that official. I recommend locking in the C because if you go back in transition, if we're not sure who's supposed to be the new trail or the new C or the new lead for that matter, then we end up with three officials not knowing who has last second shot, who needs to handle a crash at the basket on the other end of the floor. and it puts us in a really tough spot. By locking in the C, you know that that person's going to be the C no matter what, whether we go in transition or stay on the one half of the court. So my recommendation is to do that. I've been burned on that before where we didn't do that and we ended up having someone get tackled at the other basket and we didn't have a call and we weren't sure if the shot was going to be good. It was just an all-around mess, mainly because we didn't lock in that C. So you have that option by the Mechanics Illustrated. At the end of the day, as a crew, we just want to make sure that the three officials on the floor know who's going to have last second shot, who's going to be the primary, and then finally what we're going to do if the ball goes back and transition the other direction. Okay, that will do it for training tape number 5. Again, several good plays to talk about as a crew, especially as we finish up with the regular season and head into section play. These are the kinds of plays and similar that can get us in trouble if we don't talk about it as a crew and how we're going to cover it. Again, don't have to do it exactly the way that it was shown on this tape, but if everyone on the crew is on the same page in each of your particular games, we'll be in a really good spot. So we'll try to have another tape or two before we get to the end of the section time, but finish strong, have a great finish to the regular season, and good luck to those that are working section playoff games, and we'll talk to you next week.